he's taken out after ESG, environmental social governance, when it comes to investing and just corporate policy in Fortune 1000 companies, sort of a metastasization of the die ideology. And very successful. The biotech company he started as obviously a young man, he's still a young man, was very successful, so he made a lot of money. And he's taken on the Larry Finks of the world, BlackRock, when it comes to ESG-driven investing. Here was his announcement video this week, in part.
We're in the middle of a national identity crisis. Faith, patriotism, and hard work have disappeared, only to be replaced by new secular religions like COVIDism, climatism, and gender ideology. We hunger to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet we cannot even answer the question of what it means to be an American. Today, the woke left preys on that vacuum. They tell you that your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation govern who you are, what you can achieve, and what you're allowed to think. This is psychological slavery, and that has created a new culture of fear in our country that has completely replaced our culture of free speech in America. And that is why today I am announcing my run for President of the United States.
I mean, there's a little bit of, it's a little cliched, but nonetheless, I mean, I like a lot of what he said and what he's done. He's obviously a sharp guy. Is there a possible third track available in the Republican primary for president for somebody from outside the system, like a successful entrepreneur like Vivek Ramaswamy? Well, let's get a businessman's take on Vivek. Christopher Whalen joins us now, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, LLC, author of Ford Men, From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst as well. Chris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning.
What do you think about Mr. Ramaswamy?
Well, I like what he said. I think it's all obviously true. We're in a time of national confusion. The left took COVID and turned it into a soundbite. And nobody has had the courage to stand up to them and push back. And I think the Republicans are working on that. But it takes courage. When you have people getting assaulted on the subway in New York City because of the color of their skin, and you have gangs of people roaming around spouting woke ideology at you, I think, we're kind of on the cusp of civil war in a sense. But I don't think it'll end up that way. I think the economy is going to slow down a lot this year, and then all of this fun and games and the, crypto companies going public and the rest of it is going to disappear pretty fast. That's the irony, of course. Joe Biden is moving Lyle Brainerd from the Fed over to the White House, and I think it evidences fear and weakness on the part of the economy. I think there are a few people in the White House that have their heads screwed on, and they realize that by the end of this year we're going to have a recession for the bottom half, and then the top half is going to be doing fine.
Of course.
And the politics of that, I think, are going to be extraordinary, Dan.
But before we get to Lyle Brainerd and what you mean by that's a sign of weakness, just since Ramaswamy has made ESG, that's one of the issues in which he rose to some prominence. How important is that to address, attack, seek to uproot in corporate culture? And if things do go the way you say with respect to the economy, will those fun and games subside somewhat as well?
Well, when we have a Republican in the White House again, I hope that they completely expunge ESG from all government agencies. I think the people in the ratings community, for example, my old colleagues at Kroll and Moody's and S&P should be chastised publicly for going down this road. They've built the whole business around ESG. And you know what's so funny, Dan? It makes no sense. If you read the stuff that they publish on ESG, it is the biggest pile of nonsense you've ever seen. So, we've allowed ourselves to be kidnapped by these opportunists in our political world who have constructed these, things like ESG, which have no meaning. It's just purely rhetorical. But it helps the woke left try and advance their objectives. So I applaud this guy. I think this is great. We should be going after these people and force them to admit that a lot of the things they say are completely, vacuous and without substance.
Back to Brainerd and the elevation of Brainerd as a sign of weakness. Because why? Because she's a big quantitative easer.
Well, no, let's leave that aside. I think the bottom part of the economy, the people who were most harshly affected by COVID and by the lockdown, is slowing down dramatically. If you look at the level of defaults on mortgages for people in the low-income strata in the Ginnie Mae world, I would say about half of those loans are headed into the dumper. And this is a big problem. People oftentimes kind of don't pay attention to the world of credit and bonds because stocks are more sexy, obviously. It's easier to talk about if you don't know anything. And so when problems start in the engine room, which is credit, and this is the great strength of the U.S. economy, remember. The reason we bounce back is because we actually have a bond market. Well, when we have problems there, people in Washington are not going to know how to deal with it. I speak to a lot of agency heads in D.C., and they are running scared. I got to tell you something, Dan. Republicans are not that well tuned into the economy either, so they don't realize what's going on. But if we had a Republican candidate who was talking to people of lower means and lower income about how they've been screwed over the past 4 years, you'd win the election, hands down.
Well,
I'm not sure Republicans know how to have that conversation yet.
Sorry for interrupting. Are we going to have a housing collapse like we did in 2007, 2008?
It won't be that broad this time, Amy, but it's going to affect lower income households, and the credit cost to lenders is going to be severe. Let me give you an example. 2 years ago, when Jay Powell was giving away free money and interest rates were down around zero, mortgage companies were buying defaulted loans out of pools so they could fix them and sell them again and make money on the sale, right? They're not doing that now. They don't have the money. So all of these defaulted loans are accumulating in Ginnie Mae securities, and they advance the interest and the principal every month, but they don't have the money to fix the loan. So this pile of detritus and problems is going to accumulate. And I think people in the White House who are paying attention know this. They know that we're going to be in a recession by the end of this year. How does Big Joe run for re-election if he's coming out of a financial crisis? That's the question Republican strategists ought to be pondering.
Right. I mean, I'm still not convinced he makes the race regardless, but that's a separate discussion.
I'm with you, Dan, but nobody's pushing back on him yet.
Yeah.
You notice the Democrats have not said a word.
No,
Kamala Harris has not said a word.
They're it's that they're
moving, yeah.
Well,
there's nothing wrong.
They're waiting for the shoe to drop, I think, because they don't want to seem too
unappreciative,
aggressive. Yeah, they don't want to seem too aggressive there. But I want to go back to, you said if a Republican candidate speaks to the lower half of income earners about how they've been screwed over the last 4 years. Yeah, tell us what that sounds like.
Well, I think you have to, people actually now have heard the word inflation, and they're starting to realize what that is, which is they can't afford to live anymore. So you have to start to identify who it is in the system who's been promoting it. Who promotes the endless inflation that helps stocks, but it kills everybody. Because over time, the purchasing power of your dollar when you go to the grocery store is less and less. It's like living in Weimar, Germany, except we're in slow motion, okay? So, in this case, yeah, but you have to talk to people who can't live anymore. And why are they supporting left-wing candidates in states like New York, where we should have won the governorship? Because we're not articulating this message well enough yet. That's the problem. We got to talk to these people and become a little more populist in our outlook. And then I think the Republicans can be the majority party in this country. But they've got to realize that at the end of the game, if all we care about is pushing up stock prices with lower interest rates, that's not a winning solution, because the reason our politics is radicalizing is because people can't afford to live anymore. It's a fairly simple equation, but we don't get it yet.
You had a post at your outlet, Institutional Risk Analyst, the other day, suggesting that pump the brakes if you think that the interest rates are going to continue to steadily, neatly decline, that we could see a push to double-digit interest rates on home mortgages again before the
Yeah.
year's out. Explain.
Well, the market for housing, for mortgage loans still has way too much capacity. So you have lenders out there making loans to people today to buy a house that they're going to lose money on. Why are they doing this? They don't want to fire all their people. They're trying to keep their team intact for when the Fed drops rates, and they can make money again, right? So unfortunately, everybody thought we were going to raise rates, and by March or April this year, the Fed was going to say, okay, fine, we'll go back to the way things were. No. It looks like we're going to see rates up for the whole year. And that's going to have really tough consequences for the economy, for banks, for non-banks, for everybody, auto lenders, because the amount of increase that the Fed has baked into the pie is so large compared to what we're used to, going back 30 years, right? We haven't seen this kind of move in interest rates in a long time. And the shock it is sending through the whole system, Dan, is profound. People don't see it yet because it's at the bottom of the stack. We're still seeing delinquencies rising in those lower income households, but it's going to move up. And that's the inevitable aspect of credit. You start to see it in credit cards. You can see it now. You start to see it in subprime auto. Yeah, we can see it now. But nobody's talking about it. It hasn't risen to the top of the soup in terms of the national narrative.
But Jay Powell has to see the same thing that you're seeing, and then it's just a question of is it a question of willpower, or is he going to have no choice but to continue to jack interest rates well beyond, as you were suggesting, another quarter point or two that's been predicted?
Well, here's the thing about the Fed. You got to remember the Fed as an organization is woke, okay? So they think about the economy, they think about GDP and all of this economist gobbledygook. They don't get into weeds very often. So when you say to them, gee, guys, if Credit Suisse is not acquired or if we don't clean up this mess in a good way, this could have real bad implications for the housing market. Why? Because Credit Suisse has been the key bank in that space for 10 years. They have been the go-to guys in government lending. So if they leave the room, who's going to pick up the slack? Guess. Goldman Sachs. You can't build a government loan market on Goldman Sachs. I'm sorry. I love them dearly, but no. So the liquidity in these markets is ebbing as we talk, and the willingness of people to come in and buy distressed assets is declining as we speak, Dan. So what's going to happen is by June or July, the credit markets are going to be really seizing up. And you know how you see this? Look at the foreclosures and bankruptcies in commercial properties. These are all related things, okay? They may not fit neatly together if you're an economist working at the White House, but if you work in the world of credit, you can always see the crisis coming. You know, the guys who are short this market now are growing in number every day, and there's a reason for that. So, you know, just trust me on this. The Fed is going to miss this just the same way the people at the White House are, because they're not focused on detail. They're focused way up here at 10,000 feet.
So then one of the conventional handles about the prospect of a recession is that it won't be deep, but it will be long. It's going to last longer than people anticipate. It's not going to be in a shock and a recovery. It's going to be essentially malaise, sort of Carter years malaise is what some have said. What it seems to me you're suggesting is that there may be malaise, but there may be a deeper shock than people are expecting too.
Well, yes, because the Fed has manipulated interest rates so dramatically from where they were. They were at zero. You know, we're right now, people are writing 6.25% loans this morning, and they're still barely breaking even on the loan. They're not making money when they sell that loan into a security. 2 years ago, they were making 4 and 5 points when they sold the loan. So that's the difference. And consumers, I think you're going to see, you know, the lower FICO borrower who's trying to get a first house in a FHA, you know, program, 99% loan, 1% down. The cost of that loan could easily get up to 8 or 9%. as we go through the rest of this year. That's going to stop activity pretty much dead in its tracks. And that's not good. So, again, I think the reason that they moved Lyle Brainerd from the Fed to the White House is because the White House is actually running scared. They're going to have a big smile on their face as they talk about the economy, but they can see the numbers. FHA delinquencies are above 10% now. And that means that every servicer out there is losing money, okay? How long are they going to do this? Maybe a year. So the Fed will have to drop rates by the end of this year. You can guarantee that because the system can't take it for that long.
Well, so back to what you said in response to Amy's question about the housing market, and the bottom half is going to take a hammering and the top half will marshal through. How does the bottom half take a hammering without it impacting at least some of the top half?
Oh, it will. It will ripple through the whole system. Because, the loans that a bank owns that they make to rich people, okay, there's very little default activity on those loans. The banks don't worry about it. And that's why. They were told by Elizabeth Warren, don't make loans to poor people. So the whole marketplace for lending for lower-income households has changed compared to 2008. The banks aren't in that market at all. And that's a source of weakness in the system. It really is. And they've been trying to deal with this over time, but Washington is not good at details, as you know. They really are not. They can mail checks to everybody every month, but that's about the only competency they have. So if you ask them to manage a financial crisis or understand what's happening inside the private markets, they're lost. Totally lost. I mean, I can count on one hand the agency heads in the Biden administration today that are actually competent. The rest of them, forget about it. They're just decorative. So, when you're in a society where appearances are more important than substance, this is what happens, right?
Right. Trains derail, and so does an economy.
The Biden administration is filled with attractive, articulate incompetence. And we're going to find out who they are in the next few months.
Christopher Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Ford Men From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. Chris, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Dennis Prager here. Sue and I mean it. Dogs are part of our family. We love Otto and Snoopy so much, there's nothing quite like their loyal companionship. So we provide them with Rough Greens. In fact, I just talked to my wife about it because we want them to be healthy and we want them to be with us as long as possible. That's true. I know Sebastian Gorka feels the same way.
The Pragers and I couldn't agree more. Our pups, Killian and Leia, rely on us to provide what's best for them. And naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black has packed Rough Greens full of vitamins, minerals, digestive enzymes, omega oils, and more that supplement their food in a way that has shown us great results. Trying out Rough Greens is an easy yes, recommended by me, Dr. G.
Naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black here, and I'm so proud that the Prager